It took Samantha and Lillian only 10 minutes to reach the youth hostel. Samantha knew if she had tried to find this place on her own, it would have taken her hours and hours, but to Lillian such a task was simple. Sometimes Samantha wondered if the whole universe reshaped itself under Lillian's feet simply to make life easier for her. Lillian was so sensible and self-assured, she probably could have orientated herself in the Antarctic, where everything was pure white, not a landmark in sight. The youth hostel itself was a small wooden building, distinctly unremarkable, surrounded by a sprawling field of deep purple heather. The heather swayed in the breeze like ocean waves. Roberta stood amidst these flowers, her hair tumbling in carefully controlled curls around her shoulders. Had she been waiting out here in the cold, with only her cardigan for protection, searching for Samantha? Samantha felt humbled. So Roberta really did care, after all, despite the cruel things she had said. Maybe she shouldn't have run away. It was a melodramatic reaction on her part, and it caused Roberta worry. That much was evident given by the pained look on the other girl's face. Ah! The moment Roberta saw Samantha walking towards her through the heather, she lifted her head, lips parted. For a few brief moments, a smile flickered across her lips, but it was soon doused by a serious frown. So I see you didn't get lost after all.
Well, I did get lost, but I had help. Lillian found me and brought me here.
Lillian, huh? It's nice to see you.
Roberta gave Lillian a mistrustful glance, her eyes narrowed slightly, which rather suggested she had found Lillian's presence about as nice as having a tooth extracted without anaesthetic. Lillian returned the less than cordial greeting with a small nod of her head, her expression unreadable.
The pleasure is all mine. It was lucky Samantha had found you. It's nice to know she has a friend who's so reliable.
The sarcasm in Roberta's tone was not lost on Lillian, but the older girl did not react. She rarely did.
As head of the student council, it's my duty to ensure the safety of my fellow students. I was simply doing my job. There is no need to compliment me.
Samantha winced at that. Of course, Lillian was just doing her job. That was why she led the trembling Samantha, light-headed after crying so hard for so long, to the youth hostel. It was not because they were friends. Not anymore. It was because Lillian was doing her job. Was that all Samantha was to Lillian now? Just another point on her checklist she had to cross off? A minor nuisance she had to take care of? If so, it hurt. It hurt so much Samantha could hardly stand it.
Sam?
Roberta looked at Samantha, who must have involuntarily winced at the thought of Lillian.
Are you all right, Sam? You look as though you've been crying.
It was one thing that Lillian knew about, and had seen, Samantha's embarrassing breakdown, but Roberta? That would have been far too humiliating. Should she tell Roberta what happened? Well, duh. Well... Samantha looked up at Lillian. The older girl stood there, one hand on her hip, a small frown on her face. Why should Lillian look just the same as ever, when she had just broken Samantha's heart? How could she be so cold? Maybe she had never cared for Samantha at all. She had certainly never cared for Samantha as much as Samantha had cared about her. Lillian and we had a talk, but Lillian decided that we were incompatible.
Incompatible?
That's right. Well, at least I know where I stand now. You were right, Roberta. All this time you were right. I was a fool for not believing you. Samantha sniffed and wiped her eyes with the back of her arm. Was she going to cry again? No, not this time. She wouldn't allow it. She didn't want to give Lillian the satisfaction, not that she truly believed Lillian was cruel enough to derive pleasure from her suffering. Roberta's face softened. It was clear she knew what Samantha had meant, even though her words were vague.
Oh, Sam, you silly girl. I told you this would happen.
I know, but I kept on hoping. Now I realize I was wrong.
Sam, you poor thing.
Roberta glared at Lillian. She was slightly shorter than the other girl, but she made up for it with the intensity of contempt in her voice.
I hope you're pleased with yourself, Lillian. You just alienated the one person in the world who loves you the most. It was not with malicious intent, I assure you. It was for her own good. Then why did you make her cry so much? How could that be for the greater good? It is because I care about her. If you keep pandering to her like that, she will not get better. Sometimes you have to be cruel to be kind. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm going to go and inform Miss Pope that Samantha and I have returned, as it appears Samantha is in no fit state to tell her herself.
And with that, Lillian brushed past Roberta, her blonde hair fluttering as she exited the room. Roberta stared at her back, her mouth open like a goldfish. It seemed not even Roberta could quite believe just how coldly Lillian had blown her off.
That girl, I have no idea what you see in her.
Samantha wished she could reply in the affirmative, but she could not. Even after everything Lillian had said to her, she still loved her. She loved her more than ever. To insult Lillian when she was no longer in the room and could not defend herself would be a great injustice. Samantha couldn't do it. She could never have hated Lillian, no matter what, even if she belittled her feelings or made her cry or even broke her bones. That was how deep Samantha's irrational affections ran. Well, she is very smart. And she's so forthright too. She never tells lies to make other people feel better. She always says exactly what she thinks. Roberta looked at Samantha up and down, taking in her beraggled hair, her puffy eyes and red cheeks.
And is that really such a good thing?
I don't know. Maybe. Perhaps people should be more hard on me more often, just as you were this morning. I probably deserve it. Roberta winced. She had been so relieved to see Samantha again, and then so horrified to see just how woebegone her friend looked, that she almost forgotten about what had transpired between them earlier. She must have looked like such a hypocrite, berating Lillian for her coldness when she herself had been inexcusably cruel to Samantha only an hour or so prior.
Look, Sam, I'm sorry about that.
Why are you sorry? Weren't you telling the truth?
I was, but I should have handled it more delicately. I was being unfair. I apologize.
Samantha offered Roberta a small smile. It was hesitant, unsteady, as though delivered by a girl who had not know what smiling truly was, but it was a smile all the same. Thank you, Roberta. I'm sorry I've been taking you for granted. You're a far better friend than I deserve. Chatter filled the air, mingled with the sound of scraping chairs and clinking cutlery, as the students of St. Mary's sat at the long table laid out in the dining room of the hostel. The dining hall was about as extravagant as Samantha had expected. It was a small, cramped space with a sloping ceiling that threatened to collapse in on itself at any moment. The walls were painted white, and were warped with old age, buckling under the weight of the ceiling. The floorboards were wooden and squeaked horribly with every single footstep that passed over them, as though they were filled with mice. Samantha looked down at the table, trying to catch Lillian's eye, but the older girl had been steadfastly ignoring her since the discussion at the lake. This was no different than it had been during the last 3 months, but Lillian's cool demeanour stung Samantha anew, like salt water in an open wound. It must have been because she had hoped. Samantha had allowed herself to believe that their relationship could still be repaired, and that was why it hurt all the more to realise it could not. It was too late. Samantha did not want to think about Lillian, though she thought about little else. She wanted to concentrate on something else, anything else. But what was there to focus on? The biffle. Samantha looked at Roberta. The other girl sat beside her, her palms spread out, fingers extended. There was a small white circular tablet resting in the centre of her palm, which trembled slightly at her smallest of movements. Samantha watched as Roberta brought her palm to her mouth and placed the tablet inside it. Then, in a weary manner that suggested she had done this innumerable times before, Roberta picked up a glass of water and swallowed. Samantha could not help but feel like something of a voyeur as she watched Roberta swallow, her throat convulsing slightly. For some reason, Samantha was not sure why, watching other people take medicine seemed like a deeply intimate invasion of privacy. Maybe that was because when people fell seriously ill, they were ushered into hospitals, hidden away inside white rooms as though they had something to be ashamed of, some secret to hide. Well, she was being melodramatic. Melodrama was something she excelled at, always had done. Roberta may have been required to take medicine every other day, but she was hardly knocking at death's door. Roberta was just too sensible to die an early death. She was not the kind of person who succumbed to illness, no matter how intense, and this particular illness was something many people suffered all across the world. Is it your allergies? Are they playing up? Roberta nodded, brushing a few strands of hair out of her eyes as she did so.
That's right. I thought they would die down during the winter. They did for a while, but they've been getting worse again. I suppose spring really is around the corner.
A sigh.
Spring should be such an enchanting season, but there's just so much pollen everywhere. The English countryside is the worst for it. It's times like this I'm glad I live in London.
Well, if your eyes start to water, you shouldn't rub them. That'll only make it worse. Roberta gave Samantha a withering look.
I know that, Samantha. I have to deal with hay fever all my life. Well, you've really had to deal with it while you've been friends with me.
I suppose that's true. Samantha laughed, pressing the tips of her fingers together at her front. Roberta was right. She was almost always right. Why had Samantha tried to offer her advice anyway? She had just been trying to be friendly, but it was all quite unnecessary, really.
Anyway,
Roberta frowned, her lips pursed. It was an expression Samantha knew well, as Roberta often had cause to direct it at her.
You seem somewhat restless. You haven't eaten much either. Are you feeling all right?
I'm not hungry. This food killed any appetite I may have had. And even if the food had been delicious, which it decidedly, categorically was not, Samantha doubted she would have been able to eat much of it anyway. She still felt sick.
Well, that's certainly true. You should try to eat more, though. We have a busy day tomorrow. We'll be doing a lot of walking.
Samantha groaned. She did not even want to think about tomorrow. What was the point of tomorrow if it was without Lillian? What other purpose did she have to get out of bed at all? She should never have come on this trip. Why had she come on this trip? All Samantha wanted to do was disappear, like rivulets of water running down the drain. Roberta was kneeling by the side of her bed, unpacking her suitcase. Even though they were only staying at the youth hostel for 2 nights, Roberta was adamant about unfolding her clothes, lest they get creased. Samantha did not know why she cared so much. Given this was a school field trip, the only clothes they were allowed to wear were their school uniforms. That and their pyjamas. Just who was Roberta trying to impress anyway? Perhaps it was nobody but herself. Roberta's standards had always been incredibly high. Samantha, however, cared less about what she looked like. That should have been evident given how poorly she had cut her own hair last night, or to be more precise, this morning. At the moment, Samantha didn't care all that much about anything. Not after what Lillian had said. Lillian. Samantha could still remember what Lillian had said, almost word for word. How could she not? Samantha had always hung on to every single syllable Lillian Wordsworth spoke. To Samantha, Lillian's words were even more precious than pearls. Even when those words were directed against her, sharp as razors. Even when they cut close to her bone, in between her ribs and through the heart, and made her bleed. Samantha was such a fool, she cherished everything Lillian gave her, even insults. She probably would have thanked Lillian for spitting on her, she was so impossibly enamoured. Samantha wished she could forget Lillian's words, erase them from her mind, but she would not allow herself to. She simply couldn't. Trying to forget Lillian would undoubtedly hurt even more than remembering all the cold, callous things she had said. Samantha's head hurt. She tried to focus on a book, clutching it tighter than necessary to stop her hands from shaking, but she couldn't. The words blurred together on the page, no matter how often she blinked, and she kept rereading the same sentences over and over again. Samantha loved reading. Books were a release for her, whether they were hardbacks on display in shop windows or ancient tomes with yellowing pages, the insides inscribed with birthday wishes to unfamiliar men or women that were probably long dead. Right now, however, Samantha could not concentrate. She felt so trapped inside her own skull, so depressingly yet defiantly Samantha Taylor Coleridge that she could not even conjure up an image of a water flea, let alone an entire universe. She needed something to distract her. Hey, look what I found! And that sounded like it might be good enough. Georgia's voice was so exclamatory, one would have forgiven for assuming she had discovered a chest of hidden treasure, and it drew Samantha from her melancholy musings. She closed her book, not even bothering to mark the page she had been on, and set it to one side. Even Roberta lifted her head, distracted from her unpacking.
What is it, Byron?
You'll never guess, Bobby, my friend. I was just rifling through this cupboard, and I found this. Georgia drew a box from the cupboard and held it out for the other girls to examine. It was tattered, worn by use, and was covered in dust. It must have been in there for a while. When Georgia blew on the box, the dust that had been resting upon it, undisturbed for who knows how long, scattered. It danced through the air like dandelion clocks, ghostly and ethereal. Oh, pretty. Unlike Samantha, however, Roberta did not appreciate the transcendent beauty of dust.
What are you doing? I haven't finished unpacking my clothes yet. You'll get them dirty.
But I'm all the way over here, and you're all the way over there. Lighten up, Bobby.
That isn't the point. You should show some more respect for other people's personal things.
Yeah, whatever.
Don't whatever me. This is serious.
And so is this. Look. And with that, Georgia deposited a woe-begone, moth-eating cardboard box onto her bed. Samantha got to her feet and moved over to inspect it. So did Percy. Eventually, after a long pause,
"Oh, fine then."
So did Roberta. Upon examining the box, Roberta instantly groaned, pressing one hand against her forehead as though she was starving off a headache.
Not the game of life.
Yes, the game of life. Isn't it great?
It's terrible. No wonder it got left behind here. It's so tedious.
Kind of like life itself, huh?
Ha ha. Very funny.
At least it isn't as dull as Risk. We agree upon precious little, but at least you have to concede on this point, Bobby.
I happen to like Risk.
Of course you do. I shouldn't be surprised. A dull old maid like yourself would like a dull old game.
Who are you calling old? I'm not that much older than you.
I think the game of life is depressing. Depressing? Samantha frowned. The cartoon characters drawn on the box certainly didn't look depressed. They were smiling so widely, just looking at them made Samantha's jaw hurt. Samantha had never smiled like that before, not even for a school photograph. Especially not for a school photograph. It's all about money. Whoever has the most money at the end of the game wins. Don't you think that's rather a mercenary way of looking at things? It might be mercenary, but that's just the way life is. Don't say that's the way life is as though it makes it so, Georgia. But it's true. You're such a capitalist. We live in a capitalist society. What else can I do? It's eat or be eaten out there. You better buck your ideas up, Percy, before I take a bite out of you. Cut that out, Percy pouted as Georgia tugged on her hair, just as a naughty little boy might. Anyway, I hope those lofty morals of yours won't dissuade you from having a game with me.
Why do you even want to play the game of life, of all things? It doesn't really suit your image.
You seem like the type who would enjoy chess more. Samantha did not add that was because Georgia seemed like the kind of person who would love to preen over her intellect, rather than whiling her hours away playing games for young children. Then again, Georgia Byron was full of surprises. Oh, Cluedo. The sombre murder mystery aesthetic seemed to suit Georgia more than the colourful cartoon faces beaming from the Game of Life box did. Georgia was exactly the kind of person who would find the untimely death of Dr. Black, bludgeoned to death by a candlestick in the billiards room, amusing. Although I do like Cluedo, Cluedo isn't here. We'll have to make do with this instead. You're saying that like we don't have a choice. We don't. I'm bored and I want to play something. George's eyes sparkled mischievously. Unless you would rather do Truth or Dare, Bobby.
I already told you not to call me Bobby, and we're not playing Truth or Dare. It is so infantile.
Oh? So does that mean you've got a lot of deep, dark secrets hidden away behind that pretty face of yours?
I don't have any secrets, dark or otherwise. I'm just too old to play these silly children's slumber party games, especially with a person like you.
Somebody's touchy.
And whose fault do you think that is?
You're afraid that you're gonna lose, huh? This, of course, was the right thing to say. Roberta's face flushed so intensely it looked like a broiled radish.
Of course not. Especially not the game of life. Even a blindfolded monkey could play that. It's just luck.
Then why don't you give it a shot?
Fine. But just once, and this is only so I can wipe that smug smile off your face.
Samantha watched the two girls bicker like a spectator at a tennis rally, turning her head back and forth with each successive insult. Did this mean she had to play too, or... Well, maybe that wouldn't be so bad. Maybe it would help take her mind off Lillian. Hey Bobby, it's time to pay up.
Why are you suing me? I don't even have that much money. Percy's the one who's winning, not me.
That may be true, but I like Percy more than I like you, Bobby. Therefore, I am suing you. Do you have a problem with that?
So you're willing to sacrifice your own chances of victory just to make things more difficult for me?
That's about the gist of it, yeah.
Well, at least you're honest. I don't know if that makes it any better, though.
Sighing, Roberta handed over a small handful of colourful money to Georgia. Though she was irritated at Georgia's underhanded tactics, she could not fault her. She was not, after all, breaking any rules. Even when Roberta hated whatever task she was engaged in, she always followed the rules, right down to the letter. Maybe that was why she didn't enjoy board games very much. She was too serious. Thank you kindly. Georgia took the money with a grin, her pointed teeth glistening in her mouth like shards of glass. Oh, now it's my turn. Percy spun the spinner and it landed on a 4. She moved her little car 4 squares along the track, as instructed, and read the information on the square where she had landed. You go on a holiday to Italy. Pay £10,000. Doesn't that seem a little steep for a holiday? Yes, but it doesn't specify how long you're in Italy for. For all we know, you could have stayed there for years. I suppose so. I don't know if the hot weather would be good for my skin, though. It might not be good for my children either.
You don't have any children. They're just plastic pieces.
Right now, but perhaps someday. Do you really want to be a housewife that much? I wouldn't mind it. Don't snort like that, Georgia. I love children. They're just so cute with their button noses and tiny fingers. And screaming mouths and flailing limbs, rashes and scabs and dirty nappies. Ugh. Georgia shuddered. I would rather die than have children. It would ruin my figure too. There are more important things in life than your figure, Georgia. Next, it was Samantha's turn. Like Percy had before her, she spun the spinner. Of course, she got a 2. For some reason, Samantha's spins had been decidedly pathetic throughout the game, and she was lagging far behind everybody else. Sadly enough, this felt like a suitable representation of her own life. It was so fitting she couldn't help but smile, though wryly. Getting so many low spins might have been a blessing if they had made her stop upon squares that allowed her to collect more money, but that was not the case. Instead, she kept landing on squares that forced her to throw her money away. They were only halfway through the game and she was nearing bankruptcy. At least she had a husband and 3 children to keep her company. Actually, make that 4 children. Samantha sighed as once more she was greeted with the news that she had been given birth to yet another child. Why do you look so gloomy? The birth of a child should be a joyous occasion. It would be joyous if I had any money. You have to give your money for each child you have, though. Yes, but it won't be enough to pay for their education. Samantha bit down on her lower lip and began to chew, as she often did when troubled. It was ridiculous that a simple board game could be distressing her so much, but it was. If this were any indication on how her life was really going to pan out, she might as well have hung herself from the wooden rafters right then and there. Percy had been right. The game of life really was depressing. It wasn't that much more enjoyable than her real life. I'm not cut out for motherhood. I can't look after all these children. This is such a bad idea. Samantha turned to look at Roberta, who was sitting to her left. Unlike her, Roberta had only 1 child. Roberta?
Yes?
If I give you a couple of my children, would you look after them for me? Samantha looked at Roberta imploringly, eyes wide, determined to unleash upon her close friend a torrent of her most silver-tongued sentiments.
I realize this may sound like a detriment, but in the game of life, having more children is a boon. You stand to benefit a great deal from this arrangement, given you can collect money on their lives at the end of the game. It's called forward thinking.
Something that Samantha was notoriously bad at.
The only thing I ask in exchange is a mere trifle. Something I'm sure a goodly woman such as yourself can part with, Bobby. All I want is a little bit of money for your generosity to tide me over. Do these terms sound acceptable? Would you be willing to help a friend in need? You must be willing, for you have proven yourself time and time again to be such a reliable friend. I would expect nothing less of you, Roberta.
Roberta stared at Samantha in shock, her eyes wide.
Are you trying to sell your own children?
Yes, that is so. Though I wish it did not come to this. Desperate times call for desperate measures. I fear I can't afford to look after them, given my current circumstances. They will starve, Roberta. Do you truly want the death of my children weighing upon your conscience? You can prevent this tragedy if only you open your heart, and your wallet too.
Be that as it may, it's against the rules. You can't sell your children to other players in the game of life.
But
there are no buts. You've made your grave, now you must lie in it.
But I'm a terrible mother. If you won't look after my children, Roberta, at least do a decent thing and call the authorities. I can't cope here.
I'm sorry, Sam, but board games have rules for a reason. If we start ignoring them willy-nilly, who knows what might happen?
Who knows what might happen indeed? Anarchy, no doubt.
And you would love that, wouldn't you?
Samantha sighed heavily, her shoulders slumping. And so it seems all of Samantha's orating had been for naught. Her conversational skills really were getting rusty. Anyway, Bobby has a point. You gave birth to all those kids, Sam. Now you have to face the consequences.
Isn't that why you wanted to be a man, Georgia? So you'll never have to face the consequences of all your flings?
Maybe. In the game of life, though, I only have 2 children. I'm a responsible father.
I wonder, just how many poor women have you left, desolate and heartbroken, after one-night stands that meant nothing to you but everything to them?
Who knows? I am devilishly attractive, after all.
You're not when you boast like that.
Oh? I thought women found self-esteem attractive in men.
But you aren't a man.
I would be a terrible parent whether I was a man or a woman.
Well, I can't argue with that one.
Samantha sniffed.
You're so cruel, Roberta.